had something on my heart for a couple months now, and as I was praying overnight and trying to kind of get what God wanted me to say this morning, I felt like he wanted me to go back and do kind of a little refresher just on what salvation is. Not even necessarily the definition, which we believe here the definition to be, you're going to be saved from poverty, sickness. Salvation in itself means health, joy, peace, rescue, well-being, all the things that deliverance, all the things people think they're going to have in heaven. But if salvation's for here, why do we need it when we get in heaven if you've already got it? So it's for here. Those things are all for here. And so that's not even what I'm going to talk about. I just kind of want to, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go through and I'm going to tell you the scripture references so you can write them down. And then I want you to put your Bibles down and I'm just going to read and I'm going to jump around a lot. And we may later go to some of the scriptures, but some of these first ones, it's like, I want to take you from the beginning when God created the earth through the fall of Adam, and then what it meant when Jesus came and did what he did. And I'm doing all that to set up something else that I want us to get. That I think maybe we have it here, maybe we don't, but I know I've heard some stuff the last couple months in the body of Christ that this is something that's really killing people. And like they think they're doing good and they think they're doing right, but it's destroying them. So I'm going to go through first and just give you these scripture references. We're going to start out Genesis 1 through 3. Genesis 1, 26 and 27. Tell me if I go too fast. Genesis 2, 7. Genesis 2:15 through 17. Genesis 3, 6 and 7. John 3, 3 through 6. 2 Corinthians 5:19 through 21. Romans 6:4 through 23. And this is all out of the Amplified Bible. And I may stop and say some little comments here and there through it, but I really want you to listen because this is what I believe that salvation is. This is what I believe that God wanted us to be from the beginning, and we gave it all away, and He's so good. He's so good that He came back and bought it all back for us and has handed it back over to us, okay? Okay, so in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and an empty waste, and darkness was upon the face of the very great deep. The Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God said, "Let us, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, make mankind in our image, after our likeness, and let them have complete authority over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, the beasts, and over all of the earth, and over everything that creeps upon the earth." So God created man in His own image. In the image and likeness of God, He created him. Male and female, He created them. Then the Lord God formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath or spirit of life, and man became a living being. So right there, you hear people say all the time that we were created in His image, that we're created in His image. We're created in His image. Okay, originally we were created in His image. He breathed the breath of life into us. We were created in His image in the spirit realm, okay? We were just like Him. Adam and Eve were just like God. They were made just like Him. They had His Spirit in them, ruling and reigning them. See, we aren't necessarily in His image right now because we gave that right away, okay? So, yes, that was God's original plan. That's what he did, and it's still his plan for us. But we can't always go around claiming that we're made in his image when we're not acting like we're in his image, right? Okay. But he did make us a way. It gets good news because he made a way for us to be in his image again, okay? And the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to tend and guard and keep it. And the Lord commanded the man, saying, you may freely eat of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and blessing and calamity you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it you shall surely die. And the woman saw that the tree was good, suitable, pleasant for food, and that it was delightful to look at, and a tree to be desired in order to make one wise. She took of its fruit and ate, and she gave also some to her husband, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves apron-like girdles. Okay, and I've heard teachings upon teachings upon teachings. They didn't really die when they ate of that tree. You know, they didn't die for years and years and years later. Well, that's because we're always looking at the physical realm. They died in the spirit in that moment because why were they naked? Were they naked before that? And again, don't think physical. They were clothed with the Spirit of God. And the moment they ate of that tree, they spiritually died. And they had to clothe themselves with something else. And that is, again, don't think physical stuff. We clothe ourselves with things all of the time when we're not trying to get the Spirit of God to work in us. You know, we come up with our own ideas, our own things all of the time. So they died immediately in that moment. Immediately in that moment, they saw they were naked. And like, I think people always think, oh, well, they were always naked because you're looking at the physical realm, and then poof, their eyes were just open and they saw it. No, they were clothed by the Spirit of God. The moment that they ate of that tree, they took on another master, and they were no longer clothed by the Spirit of God. So they died in that moment. Their spirits died in that moment. Okay, now we're moving on into when Jesus was talking to Nicodemus. Jesus answered him, I assure you, most solemnly, I tell you that unless a person is born again from above, he cannot ever see the kingdom of God. Nicodemus said to him, how can a man be born when he is old? Can he enter his mother's womb again and be born? Jesus answered, I assure you, most solemnly, I tell you, unless a man is born of water and the Spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God. What is born of the flesh is flesh, and what is born of the Spirit is spirit. Okay, and again, you know, you can read the scriptures on so many levels. It's for us personally. It's for our church. It's for the church as a whole. It's for the world. It's for unsaved people, saved people. You can, I think, you know, I don't know. I've heard there's 7 heavens. I don't know where they come up with that. We know that Paul talks about a third, so there's at least 3. So can't everything of this word be on every one of those heavenly levels? So we've always took born again as a personal, this is just for me thing. And, you know, I know Mike teaches, and I believe this too, that you're born again in many, many, many areas of life. But what if this is also on a higher realm than just us personally? And what if this is talking about when Adam and Eve ate of that tree, spiritually mankind died? And what if Jesus was coming to Nicodemus and saying, mankind is going to have to be born again? The spirit of man died when they ate of that tree, and they took on the sin nature. They were created with a divine nature. When they ate of that tree, they took on the sin nature. They no longer had the divine nature in them. That died. And then, now, mankind, Jesus is saying, I have come because I'm going to bring a way that mankind as a whole can be born again, where the spirit of man can come alive again. It was God present in Christ, reconciling and restoring the world to favor with himself, not counting up and holding against men their trespasses, but canceling them and committing to us the message of reconciliation. So we are Christ's ambassadors, God making his appeal, as it were, through us. As we, Christ's personal representatives, beg you for his sake to lay a hold of the divine favor now offered you and be reconciled to God. For our sake, Christ, who knew no sin, was made to be sin, so that in and through him we might become the righteousness of God. And do you all Whoops, do you all remember what the righteousness of God is? Was that just last week we learned that? I had to think a minute too. Fulfilling the purposes. Yeah, fulfilling God's claims or purposes. So, from the beginning, it was God's purpose that mankind have his nature and be made in his image. And we gave that away. So now, through Christ, he became sin, took on the sin for us, went to the cross, laid it to rest, and handed us back the righteousness of God, which means we can once again have that divine nature and put on and fulfill the purposes of God's claims. We were buried, therefore, with him by the baptism into death, so that just as Christ we raised from the dead by the glorious power of the Father, so we too might live and behave in newness of life. For if we have become one with him by sharing a death like his, we shall also be one with him, sharing his resurrection. We know that our old renewed self was nailed to the cross with him in order that our body, which is the instrument of sin, might be made ineffective and inactive for evil, that we might no longer be slaves of sin. For when a man dies, he is freed, loosed, and delivered from the power of sin. Now we have died with Christ because we believe that we shall also live with him. Because we know that Christ, being once raised from the dead, will never die again. Death no longer has power over him. And I just loved it when I read that, because Mike just told us, I think again that was last week or the week before, we are no longer to be being made into the image of what Jesus looked like when he walked the earth. We're to be made into the image of who he is now. And who he is now can never die. He's already overcome that. He can never die. And that's the image that we're being made into now. Let not sin therefore rule as king in your mortal bodies, to make you yield to its cravings and to be subject to its lusts and evil passions. Do not continue offering or yielding your bodily members to sin as instruments of wickedness, but offer and yield yourselves to God as though you have been raised from the dead to life. And I was going to try and look up that scripture because you read that. Was that in Romans 6? Because I never did go back and look. And then when I was reading that this morning, it's like, oh my gosh, there it is. Now, if we have died with Christ, we believe that we all shall live with him, because we know that Christ, being once raised from the dead, shall never die again. Death no longer has power over him. For by the death he died once to sin, ending his relation to it once for all, and the life that he lives, he is living to God, in unbroken fellowship with him. This is the image that we're being made into. Even so, consider yourselves also dead to sin and your relation to it broken, but alive to God in Christ Jesus. Let not sin, therefore, rule as king in your mortal bodies, to make you yield to its cravings and be subject to its lust and evil passions. Do not continue offering or yielding your body members to sin as instruments of wickedness, but offer and yield yourselves to God as though you have been raised from the dead to life, and your bodily members to God, presenting them as implements of righteousness. So we have been raised from death to life so that we can fulfill the claims and purposes of God. But thank God, though you were once slaves to sin, you have become obedient with all your heart to the standard of teaching in which you were instructed and to which you were committed. And having been set free from sin, you have become the servants of righteousness. For when you were slaves of sin, you were free in regard to righteousness. But now, since you have been set free from sin and have become the slaves of God, you have your present reward in holiness and its end in eternal life. For the wages which sin pays is death, but the free gift of God is eternal life through Christ Jesus our Lord. And there you have it, salvation, resurrection. This is the whole story, okay? And there's bits and pieces and parts and things, and God will speak stuff to you and whatever. But this is it in a nutshell to me. God created earth. He made mankind to be his image, operating by his spirit, living with that breath of life that he breathed into us. He said, as long as you stay with me and stick with me, it'll be good and we can do all good things, but just don't eat of that tree. And how many of you know it probably wasn't a physical tree in the garden? It was just the enemy saying, okay, what did the enemy tempt her with? If you eat this, you'll be like God and know good and evil. We were never to know good and evil. We were never designed to know evil or good. Everybody likes good, but it's still not God. We were never designed. We were always designed to eat of his tree and of his life, okay? And the temptation was is we would be like God. So, we already were like God. We didn't know it, or they didn't know it, whatever. But when they ate of that, they died spiritually. That seed was put into all of mankind, okay? And then when Jesus came, he took all of that sin nature that we gave to the enemy, gave him the control of the world when we did that, of the earth. Jesus took on our sin, and then he handed back to us, took the keys away from the enemy, took our sin, went to the grave, left it there, resurrected, and gave us back the opportunity to have the sin nature, or the divine nature again, right? And so that, I had this revelation. We were talking one night a while back, Mike had taught about that Jesus had to work to perfection, okay? He was sin-free. He never sinned, but there are scriptures, and I didn't look them up this time, but there are scriptures. Go back and listen to his teaching. You know what it's called? You'll see it because you'll know it. It'll stand out. Jesus had to work toward perfection. He had no sin, but he still had to work toward perfection, took on our sin, died, and became everything that God created mankind to be. Then he handed us back our divine nature, and now we're working from the other side. We have sin in our lives. We don't have a sin nature anymore. He took care of that. If you receive the gift that he gave to you, you don't have a sin nature anymore. You now have the divine nature once again. That does not mean that you won't sin. And that does not mean that sin won't try to come and get rulership over you again. But you all felt it, didn't you? Didn't you feel it when you received him and you all of a sudden for the first time knew who he really was and took that off? There was that. You felt it throughout your whole being. Everything in you changed. And you may have gone to church your whole life, and you may have known the Bible backwards and forwards. But I think every one of you could probably get up here and stand and tell a moment or a period of time in your life when all of a sudden you realized who he really was and what he really did, and you had a physical manifestation feeling in your body of that. That was the moment when you went from the sin nature back to the divine nature. And the enemy doesn't want that. He doesn't want you to have rulership back over the things that he's controlled for so long. So he's going to keep coming at you and try to make you believe that you're still a sinner, just barely saved by grace, okay? That isn't who we are anymore. We are a people who have the Holy Spirit back living in us again. We are a people with a divine nature. The sin nature in us died. It died with him. It's not part of us anymore, okay? That does not mean you can't still sin. And it does not mean, and I don't know if you can go backwards and take the sin nature back on once you've had the divine nature, but I know you can pull away from this righteousness and doing the claims that God's claimed over you and fulfilling the promises that he's promised over you. Like everybody fights the once saved, always saved. Well, once again, that's always like a thing to get to heaven. Once saved, always saved, what does that even mean? Like, if I'm on this earth right now and I have sickness and pain and disease and poverty and every evil thing in my heart, then I'm not saved. I'm not saved. There's nothing saved about that. And what we're going to talk about is even, we've brought this up so many times that Mike told us years ago about a pastor, I think, that was an alcoholic and he quit drinking. But he would wake up every morning and huddle in the corner shaking with, I suppose, withdrawals and stuff, wanting a drink. That's not saved. I'm sorry. That is not saved. What are you saved from when you're living a life like that? Okay? So some of us went to a big conference about a month or so ago. And a big leader in the church, a guy who had been in the church, been a leader of youth and things for years and years and years, I guess. I didn't really know him. I think I knew of him kind of, but I didn't really know him. And in the middle of that conference, he stood up and told everybody that through the years he has had to fight pornography. And I've heard a lot of church leaders talk about that, okay? And you could tell he was petrified. It was a huge, huge 20,000 people in a room that he is admitting this to. And I give him kudos for, being willing to do that. And he prayed because that is a big thing in our country, right? That is a big thing in our country. And what? In the church. Yeah, it's in the church. Yeah, I've heard so many leaders and people of church talk about having to deal with this thing. But pornography is not what I'm coming up against now. Because, even he said he had a dream where, I'm not going to tell you the whole dream, but at the end, God spoke to him and said, we're not going to be able to fight this in the world when we're in bed with it as the church, And it may not just be like sexual lust, but we have lust of every kind. We have other lovers besides God of every kind. And we as the church, we've talked about this for so long now, we as the church have released that into the earth. And we as the church want to look at them and point our finger at them. It's in us. And even if you're not addicted to pornography, most of us are addicted to some kind of lust. And I'm not saying evil, nasty, dirty stuff. I'm just saying we have other lovers besides God, okay? And that was just a little bunny trail. So, what I realized as this guy was talking, he had so much shame on him. So much shame on him. You could just see it all over him. Shame and condemnation all over him. And he just kept apologizing, and he would get teary-eyed. And so one of the other guys there had been his pastor or had been in ministry with him before, and he kept saying, it's not as bad as he's saying. He wasn't like going home every night watching pornography. It was just, he would come to me sometimes and say, oh, I saw a commercial with this girl, and I just couldn't get the image out of my head. And he said, so it wasn't as bad as he's telling you it is, but he had so much shame and guilt all over him. And the way I took it, he had fought this thing for years and years and years and years, okay? Because I believe most of the church believes that they have a sin nature, that this stuff is in them, it's who they are, and they take on a fight to fight against it to get that out of them, okay? It's the wrong fight. It's the wrong fight. We don't have a sin nature anymore. So this goes back, I've shared this with you so many times, but God brought it to me again. Early on in my walk, he gave me a vision, a huge auditorium, circle in the middle with the light coming down, bleachers full, big, huge, full amount of 20,000 enemies in those bleachers. All of them trying to get at me or you or the church or mankind in general, okay? And you're in the light, you're loving God, you're loving him, and all of a sudden, here's one of these enemies right outside the light. They won't come in the light. They won't come in the light, but they'll urge you. Remember that thought you had yesterday, Jana? That wasn't of God. That's still in you. Oh my God, how can you still have that in you? You've been serving God for so many years. That's just terrible. You still have that sin inside of you. You better fight. You better go get deliverance. You better go get prayer. You better get on the floor and bite the carpet. That is still in you, Jana. That's what that little devil, he's out there outside the light saying, come on, come out here and fight with me. Come on. Come on, I'm still a part of you. Come on, you're going to have to fight to get rid of me because here I am. Here I am. Come on. And we think those things are still in us. And we think we have to go through this. And how you know it's not still in you? You wouldn't fight against it. Like, how many of you had some of these things before you served God and you didn't fight against them? You just grabbed their hand and you went on down your merry way along with them. And you writ down, and you might knew it was wrong, but you didn't fight against it. You went and your flesh enjoyed these things and you had a good time with this stuff, okay? Those enemies are out there screaming at us all the time. And the fight is not that this is still in us and we need to get rid of it. The fight is in not believing the lies that you're telling him anymore. And those guys, several of those guys got up and told different stories, and it seemed to me like all of them, as they fought through these fights, had really repentant hearts and really wanted to go the way of God. But they had a lie. The lie is what they needed to overcome, not that thing. What they needed to overcome was that this is not who I am anymore. And there's another guy I listened to that told me, he had this young girl call him on the phone one day, and she was telling him all these things sexually that she liked to do and that she liked older men. And then she kind of started, flirting with him and stuff. 2 days later, he's driving down the street, and an image comes into his head. And he's like, okay, I know what this is. This is not who I am anymore. I don't want this. I never wanted this. I don't want anything to do this. This is an enemy that has come to plant this belief in me so that I will start believing that. And instead of fighting the good fight of faith, which is what? Righteousness and bringing God, fulfilling the purposes of God. We are in all these battles. And in my vision where I was in the light, the minute you stepped out of that to fight one devil, all you see is one right there baiting you to come the minute you stepped out of that life. And it was everything you could do to get them off of you enough to step back into the light. And I see us as the body of Christ fighting this fight all the time. Is like those little things come and they tell lies of this is who you still are. You're still this. You're still this. You're still a sinner. You need to be. And the shame, that's where the shame and the condemnation come. Okay, if in your heart you're not wanting any part of that anymore, then start paying attention. Do you think devils can put pictures in your head? Do you think devils can speak things through other people? Do you think devils can put a picture in your head and then have somebody come speak something to you that confirms it so you think that's who you are? I just read you everything there, that we died with him. He took on our sin. He put it in the grave. He buried it. It is there. He exchanged our nature, took it to give his divine nature back to us. And it's like I don't see very many people that understand this concept. Believe me, I'm not real great at it sometimes. I just had something happen to me the other night, and it wasn't until 2 days later that I realized that there was an enemy trying to stop me from doing something, and I knew at the moment it was an enemy. I could feel it. I could feel the ickiness of it, but no, and James kept telling me pray, and I couldn't make myself pray. Like, I didn't want to pray and change my heart. I wanted my circumstances to change. But I knew it was an enemy. I could feel that. But sometimes you don't. Sometimes it's just a picture, or depression will get in just a little bit, just a little bit, just a little bit. And see, that's how a stronghold. You know what a stronghold is? You know where strongholds came from, why we use that word? Because in the Old Testament, when they were having battles with each other, they would build big stone walls around themselves. Well, I guess they're made out of stone. That's what I've always thought. But, they would that was their stronghold. They would have towers in there so they could see for miles when the enemy was coming. They would have men on the walls watching. They would have everything ready because that was a stronghold. It was a strong place that held the enemy from coming, okay? Well, the enemy perverts everything God does, right? So he'll take you and build a stronghold in you that's meant to keep God out. It's meant to keep other people out. It's meant to keep the love of God out. It's meant to keep the righteousness of God out. It's meant to keep you from fulfilling your purposes and your calls, okay? So, I've heard this a lot of times. You're not going to wake up one morning and have the devil just bombard you with something. Like, okay, let's say he's coming at you with adultery, okay? He's not just going to wake up one morning and go, oh, I think I'll go out and have sex with somebody besides my spouse today, right? He's probably not going to do that because we're probably smart enough, I hope we're smart enough not to just go run off and do that, right? But what's he going to do? He's going to cause a little tiff between you. And then he's going to, I see as women, he's really good at doing this to us, the enemy is. He'll come and say, he just doesn't pay enough attention to you. He doesn't really love you. Or he could have, look at that one over there, look at that husband and what he did for his wife, and he bought her this. Or, you know how the enemy whispers those little things. And then with men, I always see, like, in our nation anyway, I see, like, what do you call it, Kathy, when the women, like, you know what I'm talking about? Masculate the men. In other words, and this is so bad in our country right now, take his masculinity away from him. Make him feel like he's dumb and he can't do anything. Or because men and women, I'm sorry, most of the time men and women don't think the same way. They come at things from different directions. They see things differently. We were made differently, okay? That's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. It breaks my heart because I used to be a feminist. I used to be like, I can do anything a man can do, and don't you tell me I can't, and I'm going to show you how strong and tough I am. And I didn't want the little girly, frilly, perfumey, flowery, ew stuff. I still kind of not that much that way. But I have realized there's a softness to women. There's a nurturing to women. There's a sweetness to women. There's a gentle, step back and bring gentleness. And why do we not want to have that? That is an awesome thing that God gave us as women that we need to have. And not that men can't be soft and gentle and all those things too, but God just made us different. And sometimes we'll walk in some things that men walk in. Sometimes they'll walk in some things. But let's not fight that stuff. That is just like craziness. And how did that seep in? Same way. Okay, I think, I always believe as mankind we seem to be on a pendulum, And so 50s, 60s, 40s, whatever period it was, women weren't treated very well. And nationwide or worldwide, women still aren't treated very well. Okay, and that's not what God expected or wanted either. But, women weren't treated very well. You couldn't really speak your mind. You were supposed to stay home and take care of the kids and be barefoot and pregnant and not speak and just cater to your husband's every whim. And he could treat you however he wanted, and the law wouldn't help you or whatever, okay? And we realized that was wrong. The world did. I'm not sure the church has caught up yet, because I came in from the worldly where I grew up with men and women not really having that. We're putting women down. In fact, like I said, I was a feminist, so I was on the other side of the thing. But, we got tired of that, and now here we've swung clear over here where women treat men awful. Like, it's just like we don't want that softness and sweetness and kindness and be there to help lift him up when he needs it and not point our fingers at him all the time and all that kind of stuff, okay? So we started talking about adultery, and so that's what the enemy does, is he'll start that stuff between you, and then he'll have you look at somebody else over there and look what that husband did, look what that wife did, or you treat me like this, or you treat me like that. And there again, if we're not paying attention and caring enough about our spouse to say, okay, I'm sorry I made you feel like that. Instead, we're like, well, why do you always have to feel like that? Why are you like that? Okay, it puts more of a rift between us. And pretty soon, the enemy just keeps doing that until you get to a place where you can't even talk to each other anymore. And then what's he going to do? He's going to send somebody else that will listen to you. Okay, what is happening through all that process? Stronghold is being built because my heart's getting broken by this one I'm married to, and I don't want that anymore, so I'm going to build this stronghold and build this stronghold and build this stronghold. But here's this one over here that's treating me the way I think I should be treated. So I'll open the door and let them in my stronghold with him. And pretty soon you've got this stronghold where God can't even come to you and say, this is wrong. You need to get out of this. You need to go back to the what is that scripture talks about? The wife of your youth, Don't be running around out there after all of those things. Okay, and that works that way in every area of our lives. Like pretty much everything that we have in us that's not of God, it started out in our childhood, a lot of it. Some of it because we got hurt. Some of it because that was the only way we could exist in the situations we were in. But it came in a little bit at a time. So, okay, the one guy at the conference said his whole ministry was a ministry of holiness and pureness. That's what he preached all the time. Okay, and I'm afraid maybe he was doing it a little more out of the law than by the Spirit of God. And you know what happens then? The enemy's going to come and test that and see if that's really true. And so he had been that way for years, like a minister of holiness and pureness and everything. And not that I'm saying that's wrong, but if you're not doing it from a heart of love and you're pointing your finger at everybody else and, why can't you get free of this type of a thing, the enemy's just going to come at you and say, let's see if you can. And sometimes the enemy sends those things just because, okay, I know I get too many things started at one time. Okay, God, take me where you want to go. Oh, no, I lost my whole train of thought. That's how he does it. He starts out with these little things, and he comes in little by little by little. Okay, so I heard somebody the other day, they were talking about some bad times they'd went through, and they said, well, I just don't know. I'm saying, God, I talk to you all the time. I'm talking to you all the time. Why? And, of course, they were saying that God was bringing the bad stuff on them. But we do that too. God, I'm in prayer with you all the time. I'm in worship with you all the time. I'm in the Bible. I'm in fellowship with you. I'm listening to your Spirit. Why do all these bad things come on me? Because you're in worship all the time and you're in prayer all the time and because the enemy doesn't like that? We think that's a sign we're doing something wrong. Maybe it's a sign we're doing something right. Maybe he doesn't like the way you're moving with God. Maybe the enemy doesn't like the way you're growing. Maybe he doesn't like the freedom you're bringing to somebody else. Maybe he doesn't like the foundation that you're building for a whole church, the whole world. Maybe he doesn't like that lies are being broken and truths are coming out, and he's going to bring something to you to stop you from doing that, right? So with this one guy, the purity and holiness guy, he went on the internet. Have you ever searched for something on the internet and a whole different picture came up than what you wanted to see? Okay, well, that's what happened to him. And that picture was stuck in his head. And he believed it was him. And he believed there was something wrong with him. And how could this happen to me after I've been such a preacher of holiness and righteousness for all these years and purity, and here this thing is stuck in my head and I can't get it out of my head? And instead of going back to God and saying, okay, God, you said I have a divine nature. You said I don't have a sin nature anymore. You know I don't want this. You know this is not who I am. You know I've never wanted to be a part of this, and I don't have anything to do with this. So I'm just saying right now that this is an enemy that's come to plant an enemy, and it's not me. It's not me. It's not who I am. And the enemy may try for a little bit, but if you're not stepping out of that light to fight him, he's going to give up and come at you a different way with something else, right? But if you step out that light, I'm not kidding. I've had it happen to me, and I know you have too. You step out of the light, you get in these confrontations with these things, and they bring condemnation and shame and pitifulness and they make you question who God is, and they make you afraid that you're not in touch with God anymore, and oh my God, I'm going down the tubes and I'll never get back to you, God. And the more you fight that stuff, the more enemies come in. If one of them's working, they're going to bring friends, and they're all going to jump on you, and pretty soon you're fighting more than you can fight, and you've got a stronghold built now. And I think, even with the pornography thing, okay, so first it's just a picture of a girl in a commercial, and you fighting it and fighting it and fighting it, and you're believing it's you, and oh my God, and what? Well, then and now another one could come in and say, oh, what if you went and looked at this? Because, that one's in your head, and you like it, so why don't you come look at this one? And those things will bait you because you think it's in you. You think the fight is to get yourself out of the sin nature into the divine nature, and you're already there. The fight is to see who the enemy is, see him for what he is, and not engage with him. Engage yourself with God and keep worshiping him. Submit yourself to God, resist the devil, and he will flee. And he will. He will. And like I said, he may, especially if it's something you fought with before you knew God or you fought with since you've been serving God, he's going to try for a while to see if you'll grab a hold of it. But the fight is in here to say, I know this is not who I am anymore. This is not who I am anymore. Whatever that picture is I'm seeing in my head, tell yourself this. I know if that was still me, I would like it and want to do it. Everything in me doesn't like it and doesn't want to do it. So I know, God, that I have that new divine nature that you've given back to me, and we're going to get free of this thing. Not free of the thing he's trying to tell you have. You're going to get free of the voice that is there clamoring around you, trying to get you to believe it. And it could be anything, guys. It doesn't have to be of a sexual nature. It could be greed, lust, anger. It could be love of money. It could be anything the world has to offer. Oh, okay, fear. Okay, so now she just brought up something else I wanted to talk to you about. She said it could be fear. Okay, so we have defined in this church, we have scripture that says faith comes by hearing and hearing by the voice of God. So faith is when you hear God's voice and you obey it, right? You don't, and I do believe there are gifts of faith where God will drop something in you to believe for something that you could know how otherwise believe. But kind of that's the same thing. Like faith is God speaks something to you. You may not hear him with your physical ears, but he will speak it, and you'll know that you know that you know it's God. No matter what anybody says, they can't tell you that wasn't God. You'll know. When he speaks to you, you'll know, okay? That's faith. And when God does that, it's almost impossible for anybody to get you off of believing that, right? Okay? That's the kingdom realm of God. What do you think the enemy does? Does he not pervert everything God does? So how do you think he grows his kingdom? Faith. He's speaking things to you, trying to make you believe that's who you are. Isn't God speaking things to us and trying to tell us who we are, and we don't believe him because we can't possibly see that we could ever be that, right? So the enemy is going to pervert that, and he's going to speak things to you and try to tell you who he wants you to be, okay? And you have to learn how to discern when this is God and when this is the enemy. And you will, okay, somebody said when we were at that thing, let me see if I can find it, say it exactly. The word of the Lord and the word of the enemy are always trying to be made into flesh. Okay, doesn't God go to and fro on the earth to see whose hearts are truly his, right? Doesn't the enemy seek whom he may devour? He goes around like a roaring lion. What does that mean? He goes around like a roaring lion. He's trying to be like Jesus, who is the Lion of Judah. He goes around like a roaring lion trying to seek who he may devour. Both of them are trying to become your flesh, and you will become one or the other. Like we've said many times here, you're not independent of spirit. You are a spirit. You have a spirit. Your spirit is either going to be ran by the Spirit of God, or it's going to be ran by the spirit of the enemy. Faith is going to come by you hearing God and obeying what he says. Fear is going to come by you hearing the enemy and obeying what he says. Anything that you look at that comes from the kingdom of darkness, think about it. Go back to its origin. There is fear in there somewhere. And probably at the base of every single bit of it is the fear of we'll never be able to make it into this image. We'll never have what we need to make it into this image, whatever that may be in our lives. Is this making sense to everybody? I have been away from home twice in the last 2 months to things that I felt like were major moments in time. When we went down to that conference, I think there were things that happened there that we won't know the ramifications of for years. How many of you know that in the book of Acts, they probably didn't know all the ramifications yet of Jesus dying on the cross? Don't you think they were probably just stumbling around like, what does this mean? Like, we don't know what this means. And you think about, they didn't have internet and all the things we have, so how many people even knew that it happened? You know what I'm saying? They didn't know the ramifications. Like, we still to this day probably don't know all the ramifications of what Jesus did. So I think being in the midst of that thing, we don't know all the ramifications of what, and there's going to be times in the future when people are going to look back and go, remember what happened there, what God said there, what was done there. Then I had opportunity to go where there's a people that don't live at the same economic level that we do, and it really opened to my eyes to how the poverty spirit lies to us, not just money-wise, but in everything of our lives, every aspect of our lives. And what I realized, I've heard Kathy say this before, but I really have noticed it this last week. When you go to those places like that, or even if you just go on vacation or you go to visit somebody you love, away from here, whatever, and you feel that freedom and that excitement and you have fun and all this and that. And I know some of that's because we don't have our day-to-day responsibilities. But there are principalities and powers that rule different regions, and we live under those things all the time. And I realized after being gone out from underneath of what is ruling here, as you come back closer and closer, you start feeling the heaviness of it again and again and again. And you think, oh, this is me. Why can't I bring, say go to that conference. Why can't I bring the joy and the excitement and the fun of what we had back to us? Okay, that's not what's going on. What's going on is as you come back underneath the rulership of these things, you're feeling the heavy weightiness, and they're trying to tell you, this is who you are. This is where you live. You'll never break free of this. What makes you think you can ever get out of this? This is who you've been your whole life. This is how everybody around you is. Let's face it, guys, we're in a really poverty-stricken area here. The incomes are low. Bitterness is high. Sickness is high. You have more than me is high. Envy is high. We don't like rich people because they have more than we have, and here we are stuck in this. And what I have realized about a poverty spirit is there's no hope in it. There's no hope in it. It's like, this is just where we're at. Listen to the people who talk around you in our towns. Like, it's always going to be like, people have told me so many times in Clarinda, like, nobody's going to support you doing this. I haven't experienced that. I really haven't. But why is that? It's because our mindset is like that. And because when you live under that your whole life, that's all you know. Like, you have to break out of that. You have to get with God and let him break you out of this stuff. These are strongholds in our lives that we have come to believe is who we are. It's not who we are. We were designed to fulfill the purposes and claims of God. God's got some pretty big purposes and claims, don't you think? And until we break out of this stuff and start realizing this is not us. This is an enemy that is telling us this is who you are, this is who you always have to be, and you're just stuck here and you're never going to get out of it. We have to learn where the fight is and who the fight is against. I'm not going to read all this to you, but you can go read in 1 Samuel 16 and then 18. And this is where Saul had the Spirit of God on him, right? He went around, he prophesied. What was his donkeys? They couldn't find his donkeys or something. And he went to go find his donkeys, and these prophets came and spoke over him, and he started prophesying to everybody. Things of God. He was prophesying God, okay? And then he's made king, and he's pretty humble guy, and then all that starts going to his head, right? And then next thing you know, he's not listening to God anymore. And then it says, when you get in these scriptures I just gave you, it says the Spirit of the Lord lifted off of him. And then it says an evil spirit from the Lord came on him, okay? It wasn't an evil spirit from the Lord. It was an evil spirit from the enemy. And there's a long teaching we can go into with that too. In the Old Testament, they didn't know the difference between the Spirit of God and the Spirit of the Lord. And even as I was reading that, when you go on down, in that one scripture where it says the Spirit of the Lord left Saul, but an evil spirit of the Lord came on Saul, they used the same word for Lord in that. But as you read on down, as you read God, they use a different spirit, which just means ruler. It doesn't mean Jehovah God, okay? So the Spirit of the Lord lifted off of Saul because Saul wasn't doing what God asked him to do anymore. And it wasn't God, it was Saul. Just like Adam and Eve, Saul chose a different master. When he stopped listening to God and doing what God asked him, he's choosing a different master. And the next thing you know, he's got this evil spirit on him. David comes in, he starts playing music for him, and he can get the evil spirit to lift, okay? Pretty easy in the beginning. That's just like what I'm telling you. In the beginning, those things come and whisper their little stuff at you. And if you can recognize who they are in the beginning, pretty easy to get them lift. But if you don't recognize who they are and you take on trying to fight them in your own strength, then the next thing you know, Saul is mad at David now because he's killed Goliath. And their women are singing, David's killed his 10,000 and Saul's only killed his thousands. Now envy's getting in there. Now all these things are coming in, and there's a stronghold being built in Saul. And the next thing you know, he's trying to pin David to the wall with spears, you know. And still, David could come in at that time and kind of get the thing to lift. It was a lot bigger, longer fight. And David's life is now in jeopardy to do it, right? And then there finally comes the day where Saul tries to do that. And David's like, I have to get out of here. He's going to kill me. And the next thing you know, he's plotting. Saul is plotting every way he can plot to kill David. And this goes on for years, that Saul is trying to kill David. And you watch moments in time where Saul hears God, and he sees the truth of the matter again, and his eyes will be open for a little bit. But there's such a stronghold now built in him of envy. And, you know, he now knows that David's going to be king and he's not going to be anymore. And that has now, that I've got to kill him so this doesn't happen, has now taken him over. And that's how it works in us, is the enemy comes with these little voices, and we try to just fight that off a little bit instead of recognizing this is not us, this is not who we are. God, I need you to show me how to fight this. I need to stay in the light where you're at. I need to not go out in my own flesh and try to fight this thing, because then more is going to come, more is going to come, more is going to come. And I think when you start fighting those kind of things, the shame and the condemnation come along with those spirits. And then it gets really hard to fight. Because when you have shame and condemnation, you think you're the bad one. I'm all just a mess, you know. I can't fight this because I'm such a sinner just saved by grace. I can't. How am I going to get out of this when I'm so miserable? And God, how could you possibly love me when I'm such a mess and I'm doing this? And, you know, and it just keeps growing and growing and building and building. And we have the divine nature in us. It is in us. We in this room have the divine nature in us. We are now trying to work from a place of having the divine nature to get so sin has no rule over us whatsoever, where it can't do anything to sway us away from what God is asking us to do. So again, I say Jesus worked at that from a place of he had no sin. He worked toward perfection, took on our sin, took it to the grave, broke the power of it, gave us back our divine nature, and now we're working on the other side of it we have the divine nature, and we're working to get sin-free toward that man of perfection, where we and him are going to end up in the same place together. So I think that's all I have. Oh, and if you want to read too, 2 Corinthians 12:7, I don't know how far it goes, but that's Paul's thorn in the flesh. That's what that means too. Like, that thing came at him. It said, well, just let me read it to you real quick. I got it right here. And to keep me from being puffed up and too much elated by the exceeding greatness of these revelations, there was given to me a thorn in the flesh, a messenger of Satan, not a spirit from God, right? God wasn't worried about Paul getting too puffed up. God was the one giving Paul the revelations, right? Satan was worried about Paul getting too big and destroying his kingdom. So Satan's sending him a messenger of thorn in the flesh to keep me from being excessively exalted. 3 times I called upon the Lord and besought him about this and begged him that it might depart from me. But he said to me, my grace is enough for you, sufficient against any danger, and enables you to bear the trouble manfully. For my strength and my power are made perfect and show themselves most effective in your weakness. Therefore will I all the more gladly glory in my weaknesses and infirmities, that the strength and power of Christ may rest upon me. Okay, so this thing came up Paul 3 times and tried to make him believe that he was getting too puffed up from the revelation. I don't know what the thorn in the flesh was. I don't know if it was his eyes. I don't know if it was persecution. Who cares? It was an enemy. It was a messenger sent from Satan to stop him in the revelation that he was getting from God. And he wanted God to take it away from him just like we all do. Nobody likes sickness, bad circumstances, evil things, people talking about you, persecution, no money. Nobody likes any of that stuff, okay? And we're all going to pray, God, take this away from me if that's possible. Even Jesus prayed. If I do not have to drink of this cup, if there's any way, even Jesus didn't want to do that. If there's any way you can take this cup from me, do it, okay? But God is going to say to us, this is not about this cup being taken away from you. This is about you growing up big in my spirit to where those enemies can come at you all they want and they have no place in you. They can find nothing in you to drag you out of the light and make you fight against them and then consume you and take you over. And the whole idea is just to pull you away from God. Like, I hear people say, oh, the devil hates me. The devil doesn't care about you. I'm sorry. All he cares about is getting you away from God so that you don't fulfill the purposes and claims of God. Because when the purposes and claims of God get fulfilled, his kingdom's done. That's what he's worried about. He's worried about himself. He really isn't even worried about God. He's worried about himself. Just like, who does that sound like sometimes? Us? So whose kingdom are we walking in when we do that? What enemies are we listening to then? I'll just tell you, a stronghold is a place that has been fortified so as to protect against an attack. A place where a particular cause or belief is strongly defended or upheld. Do you ever catch yourself when somebody tries to correct you or God tries to correct you? What happens? The very first thing we almost always do, defend ourselves. Okay? That should be a clue to us. Uh-oh. There's my stronghold presenting itself. As a man thinks in his heart, so he is. So if the enemy comes to you and starts lying those things about who you are, and that's how you start thinking you are, that's what you'll become. So I guess that's all I have. Anybody have anything to add?
It was when you were talking about the light, staying in the light. And what I was hearing, and I've never thought about this before, but it was Psalms 91, he who dwells in the secret place of the Most High God, at the thousands going to fall at your left hand, 10,000 at your right hand, but these things won't come near you. You'll be the spectator. And I was thinking that, I thought, those are those things around in that arena that are trying to come. You were always told that it was the people. People, there would be 1,000 fall at your right hand or left hand and 10,000 at your right hand, because they're not serving the Lord, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. But it's not. It's those things, those principalities and powers, that are coming.
You may see, like God gave me a second vision of that a few years after that first one. And if he can't get you to come out of the light in your own life, then he'll start making you aware of somebody else that's getting beat up. And so you'll want to step out of the light to try to save them. You still have no more power in that situation than you do when you do it yourself. So, like, it may be, I know people say sometimes, well, I don't want to see 1,000 fall and 10,000 fall. We're not saying that's going to be fun. It's not fun. You think Jesus enjoys watching some of us fall sometimes when he's already paid such a high price for us not to? I don't think he enjoys that. We've had the teaching, that girl had the vision of the weeping room. He sits in the weeping room. He's in intercession for us day and night all the time, saying, come on, guys. It's not joyful to watch that, but it won't touch you, is what I'm saying. Like, okay, it's not going to ruin your life. It's not going to make you step out and get attacked by the devils, because you're going to be aware of what's really going on. And our job, I think, when you see that happening, is come on, get in the light with me. Get over here. If you step over here in this light with me, they'll let go of you. And what a joy it is when you see somebody do that and you watch the devils fall off. But sometimes you don't see that. Sometimes you see them getting drugged further and further. And I always see, I'm sure some of you in here saw the movie Ghost. I always see, like, when the bad ones died, they would have those black things. They go, and they'd come and they'd take them away screaming. That's the kind of devils I saw in that place. But they don't always look scary and nasty. Sometimes they look good and fun, So those are the things we have to stay in his light so he can tell us what is going on. And maybe one of these days when we have enough armor on and we're ready, he'll send us out to grab people and pull them back in. But I, for myself, and you can say for your own self, am not always ready for that yet. I think I still get drug in to that stuff sometimes and get drug off by those enemies. Did you have something? Here.
We talk about, bringing them thoughts into captivity. Well, that's the biggest thing the Lord has showed me is you don't, this is the first time I've heard that you don't have a sin nature. I've always been taught that the sin nature is still active, So, man, that really had made me think this morning, we don't have to do those things.
Right.
He can put everything he wants, but if we go ahead and cast down those thoughts and those imaginations, man, that's where it's at. We have to, come to the point where we don't let that in. And it comes back to you talking in Romans, we have the choice. Now we have the choice. Before we didn't.
Right.
Now, it all comes down to that choice. Who are we going to serve? And I think of the verse that says, behold, I set before you death and life, life and death. Choose life that you may live.
Yeah, and I had that scripture written down here. I think it's Romans 12:2. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind.
You were talking about the light, and then you said those things dragging us off. In reality, they're not dragging us off. We're willingly walking out and stepping out into the light, and then they're starting to overtake us.
Just let me clarify, because that's what I've always seen. They don't come in the light. They won't come in the light. But the minute you step out, they drag you. Like, you may still have one foot in the light, but they'll start pulling you. And that's what I saw in the vision is the minute they won't, as long as you stay completely enveloped in the light, they won't come in it. But they're out there trying to get you to come. And the minute you step out, then they've got you. And once you step out of that light, you're fighting in your own flesh. You have no power over devils and demons or anything if you're doing it in your own flesh. Go ahead.
That's like that. So I just wanted to do that. But then, so whenever it reminded me of that one little clip. I don't even remember what movie it was, but I told Jana about it, and it was like, warrior, come out and play. They're sitting there and they're screaming and they're taunting and they're trying to get us to believe all these things, because the moment that we believe these things, then we step out. And then also, too, going back to the one guy that had the telephone call about the girl and saying, oh, well, I like older men and whatnot. He said, I did not go to the church. I went straight to God because I knew if I went to the church with this, they would try and have deliverance meetings, and it's something about who I still am, and that's not it at all. Like,
Right.
this is so hot. Like, I just see like the newspaper and like a newspaper being printed and printed in like many newspapers need to be printed. It needs to be hot off the press and be like sent out, because this is the embodiment that the church needs to have to say, no, this is not who we are any longer. He came and he paid the price to redeem us, for us to have freedom and to walk in the fullness of who he is.
Right.
And so, like, oh God, put this in us. Let this be released everywhere.
Okay, and let me clarify, we do believe in deliverance here. It's not like we're throwing that out and saying you can never be delivered. But what I'm saying is most of what I see is people trying to fight stuff that like they've tried for 20, 30, 40 years to get delivered. And they're not getting delivered because they're not believing that who God is in them. They're believing who the enemy says that they are.
Randy Shankel taught in the Marismos that when you get, the regenerated spirit, you don't have a sin nature, because he used the illustration, were Adam and Eve created with a sin nature?
No,
Then how did they sin?
by not.
He said what happens is when you get your recreated spirit, he says you now have two lives. You have God's life and self-life. You have two wills, God's will and your will. You still have that. You don't lose your will. You don't lose your will. We find that out with Jesus, because he said, "Not my will be done,
Right.
but your will." So see, you've got two wills. So it's been out there a long time, since the 80s, because that's when he was preaching that. But you got to remember, people like to hear certain things, and so when you're told you have a sin nature, you just now have been given a license now to excuse why it is you're doing what you're doing. That's why, we preach getting free from sin. How much good news is that to most people? They don't really like that. You teach healing, most of them don't want it. I'm saying most. I'm not saying all of them, but I mean, or a lot anyway. We teach that we can be changed into his image, and then they don't like that. So they want to hear that they have a sin nature, because they want to continue. They want to have a justification to sin, because Randy's been, Shankel's been teaching this since the 80s. So it's out there, and we've taught it here, and she's teaching it today. It's out there, and you just have two lives. And like you said, God said, I give you, choose which one you're going to serve this day. You've got two wills, yours and his, and you can still choose yours even though you're born again. You can still choose your will.
Right.
And that's where we get into trouble, is when we choose our will.
But see, that was the difference between the old covenant and the new covenant, is they didn't have the divine nature. They had the sin nature. So all they could do was go do sacrifices to cover it up. We don't have to do that anymore, because he became the one-time sacrifice for once and for all that then gave you the divine nature. So now you do have the choice which one you're going to serve. And were you talking, when you just said that warrior thing, were you talking about that blue, what was it? You know what I'm talking about? Because I just thought of that when you said that. That is exactly what I'm talking about. So it's a cartoon. It's an old Disney movie, and then they redid it. It's the kid that goes in the Jungle Book. Yes, okay. Is that what you're talking about? Anyway, in that, she a long time ago sent us a little clip of this part, and there's this snake. Is his name Baloo, the kid's name? Or that's the... Do you remember what the kid's name was? Anyway, it was the kid, right? The snake was trying to bring the kid in and he was lulling him and saying all the things he wanted to hear. And the more the snake would say it, and he would make eye contact with him, and he would start going like this. And then, and I'm not kidding you, it almost made you sick to your stomach and start bawling when you watch it, because it was exactly how the enemy does it to us. And as he's talking to him, and he's getting the eye contact, and the kid's just starting to be mesmerized by it, the snake's coiling itself around him and coiling itself around him, just getting ready to squeeze the life out of him. And I think it even talked about death, like, while it was doing that, so that the kid would, like, want to go with it to die. And think about how that, we need to go find that again and watch that. Because that's exactly, isn't that, just like you said, people don't want to hear healing. Why? Because that enemy has coiled himself around us and said, everybody has to die once, so you might as well just, get yourself ready for the fact. And it's okay because God wants it, and, it's God's timing, and it's whatever the lie is. And as you get older, this is going to happen to you, and this is going to happen to you, and you're going to get sick here, and you're going to feel this way and that way, and you're going to lose your hope and your joy and all that. And he's just coiling that stuff around you and getting you mesmerized, and then all of a sudden squeeze, and that's it, you're done. Did you have something? He's mesmerized. Did you have something? Sure. Put it up to your mouth. Did you forget?
No, that was the first one where I was talking on top.
Put it up to your mouth so I can tell what you're saying. Did you have something, Jana? No? Anybody else? Okay, God. Hone our discernment on this, God, and get it so grounded in us that we have the divine nature living inside of us. We are not just sinners trying to be saved by grace anymore. We're now people of a divine nature trying to hear your voice and walk in this so that sin does not pull us out of the light anymore, God. I'm just asking you to help us be really discerning and to want to stay in the light, God, to want to stay in your presence, to want to be people of righteousness that are going to want to fulfill your purposes and your claims, God, that our wills would not mean anything to us anymore, that we would become just like Jesus, not your will, not my will be done, but your will be done. And God, ground this in us like big time, get this in us, that we are now walking to become in the image of who Jesus is now. Like I just read it to you. He's overcome death to never die again. He put sin to death to never be ruler over him or us ever. And that he paid the price for everything. We have that divine nature in us. We're now just learning how to walk in that and not let sin come in and try to pull us out and believe the lies of the enemy. So I just thank you, God, for bringing light on this. And, even though Mike says it's been in the body since the 80s, like, this is something the body of Christ needs big time, God. We need to stop being a people that are so busy trying to get, I think the deliverance thing sometimes sounds like a quick, easy fix. I can just go in, somebody will pray for me, and poof, I'll be free. Where God, you're wanting us to become overcomers of these things. Like, we are supposed to be the rulers of these things. These things are not to be the rulers of us. So, Father God, just keep teaching us, showing us, imparting to us, revealing to us, and growing us up into this mature man that all of creation is waiting to see revealed. And I just thank you, God, that you've opened our eyes to it. And Father God, we're just asking you to grow us up to become a part. We want to see this thing fulfilled in our lifetimes, God. We just praise you for it. We honor you for it. We glorify you. We magnify you, God. We lift you high. We say you're the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. You are the Most High, God. You are good and you always do good. That, God, you're not looking at man's individual sin and casting this one out or mad at this one or beating that one up because he's doing this or that. You have seen this since the beginning of time, and you know the truth about what's going on. And you know you've already provided a way for every single person on earth to be free. So, God, open our eyes as the church, like, God, that we would move out of this individual mindset, not that we don't need it individually, but that, God, we would get it individually enough that we could start moving into getting it corporately as a body and walking in these things so that we have a greater impact on what's going on around us, God. so that we have a greater impact on fulfilling the purposes and the claims that you have for us. And I just pray that we would get our eyes off of ourselves and onto the big picture. That, you know, if the enemy's attacking us, it's probably not because he really cares very much about what we're doing. Probably we're getting too close to something of yours, God, and he doesn't want us to get it. So let's be aware of that. God, make us aware of those things when they're happening. In the moment, while they're happening, not 2 or 3 or 4 days later, and that's good. If we can't get it in the moment, that's good. But start making us aware in the moment. This is what's going on. It's not even about you. It's about stopping the kingdom of God so that the enemy will not be completely shut out. And I just praise you. You are so good. Thank you, God. Oh, Terry's got something. Okay.
Is I can't remember what translation it is, but it's talking about songs of deliverance, and it says that songs of deliverance are as what you're reminding me of what you've already set me free from. That's what songs of deliverance are. So it goes right along with what you're saying.
Yep. Cool. Amen.